Tonight, on the Midnight Drive, a woman was driving through a patch of haze on a familiar road. Then something happened. Or perhaps nothing happened at all. When she became aware again, 90 minutes had passed. She was miles from where she should have been. Her car was facing the opposite direction, and she had no memory of getting there. Stories like this are often treated as mysteries waiting for answers. But some questions remain unanswered. Tonight, we'll explore missing time, vanished hours, forgotten journeys, and the unsettling possibility that consciousness may be less continuous than we imagine. Because the frightening part isn't where she ended up. The frightening part is that the road continued without her. And somehow, so did time. There are certain stories that stay with you, not because of what happened, but because of what didn't happen. There's no dramatic or cinematic ending. There's no satisfying explanation. There's no moment when all the pieces suddenly click into place. Just a question. And the uncomfortable realization that the question may never be answered. Years ago, I came across a story about a woman driving alone. It wasn't late at night. It wasn't a thunderstorm. There was nothing particularly unusual about the day itself. She was traveling a familiar route. The kind of drive you've taken enough times that you stop thinking about it. You know the road, you know the turns, you know what comes next. At some point during the drive, she entered a patch of haze. Not a dense fog, not a wall of white, just a stretch of road covered by a light mist. The kind of thing most people wouldn't think twice about. And then, nothing. Not an accident, not a crash, not a blackout, just an absence. The next thing she remembered was becoming aware again. The road was different, though. The landscape was different. And according to the clock, 90 minutes had passed. At first, she thought she was confused, disoriented. Perhaps she'd taken a wrong turn. Perhaps she'd become distracted. But the longer she looked around, the stranger the situation became. She wasn't simply somewhere unexpected. She was traveling in the opposite direction. The car itself was pointed back toward where she'd come from. Somehow, during those 90 minutes, she had continued driving. At some point, she had turned around. At some point, decisions had been made. Miles, literal miles, had passed beneath the tires. Intersections had been crossed. Traffic had been navigated. The vehicle had moved through the world. But the experience itself was gone. As if someone had removed an entire chapter from a book and left everything before and after intact. Stories like this tend to attract explanations. People rush toward them. Others suggest stress, fatigue, daydream, highway hypnosis, psychological phenomena. And to be clear, many of those explanations may be entirely reasonable. But I've always felt that people move toward the explanation too quickly. Because the explanation isn't the interesting part. The experience itself is the interesting part. Imagine it for a moment. Imagine looking at your dashboard clock, realizing an hour and a half has disappeared. Imagine recognizing the road, then realizing you're traveling in the wrong direction. Imagine trying to remember, really trying, searching every corner of your mind, looking for a single image, a single landmark, a single memory, and finding absolutely nothing. Not darkness, not confusion, just nothing. A blank space where experience should be. What would that feel like? I suspect most of us immediately imagine panic. But I think that would arrive first. Is something else. Disbelief. Because the human mind has a remarkable faith in continuity. We assume we're present for our own lives. We assume that if we experience something, we'll remember experiencing it. Maybe not every single detail, maybe not every single moment, but enough. Enough to maintain the feeling that we were there. That assumption follows us everywhere. It feels so obvious that we rarely stop to examine it. Of course I was present. Of course I experienced the drive. Of course I remember what happened. Until one day the answer becomes no. You don't. And perhaps what makes stories about missing time so unsettling is that they challenge a belief we didn't even realize we had. The belief that consciousness is continuous. The belief that awareness flows smoothly from one moment into the next. The belief that we are always accompanying ourselves through our own experiences. Most of the time, that seems true. At least it feels true. And then there are moments that make us wonder. Moments when you arrive home and barely remember the drive. Moments when a routine task seems to perform itself. Moments when you look at the clock and realize an hour vanished somewhere between one thought and the next. Most of us dismiss those experiences immediately. We call it being distracted. We call it being busy. We call it being lost in thought. And perhaps that's exactly what it is. But stories like this push the question a little bit further. Actually, quite a bit further. Because losing track of a few minutes feels normal. Losing 90 minutes feels different. 90 minutes is long enough for a full conversation, long enough for a meal, long enough for a movie, long enough for an entire chapter of your day. And yet this woman had no access to it whatsoever. The time existed. The miles existed. The journey existed. Only the experience was missing. And there's something deeply unsettling about that. Because when we think about our lives, we tend to think in terms of experiences. The things we saw. The things we felt. The things we remember. But what if a memory isn't the measure we think that it is? What if entire stretches of life can occur beyond the edge of awareness? What if the road continues even when the observer seems to disappear? The woman never found a satisfying answer. At least not one that transformed the story into something simple. The mystery remained. The missing 90 minutes remained. The unanswered questions remained. And maybe that's why the story has lingered for so long. Not because it's proof of anything, not because it demands belief, but because it leaves us standing in an uncomfortable place, looking at the road, looking at a clock, and wondering whether our experience of life itself is as continuous as it feels. What do you make of this? We'll be right back. You're listening to the midnight drive. Where we left off, a woman had lost 90 minutes. Not metaphorically, not in the way people talk about losing an afternoon to a good book, not in the way a vacation seems to disappear too quickly. 90 actual minutes. Just gone. The road remained. The miles remained. The clock remained. Only the experience was missing. And maybe that's why stories like this linger, because they force us to confront a possibility most of us never consider. Not that memory can fail. We already know that. Everyone forgets things. Everyone misplaces details. Everyone remembers a conversation differently than someone else remembers it. That's completely normal. What's unsettling is something else. The possibility that experience itself may be less continuous than it feels. Most of us imagine consciousness as a river, a steady current flowing from one moment to the next. You wake up, you move through your day, you go to sleep. There may be distractions. There may be interruptions, but the observer remains. The person experiencing the experience stays present, or at least that's how it seems. But every once in a while, life presents us with moments that don't fit that picture. You walk into a room and have no idea why. You start a task and forget what you intended to do. You arrive somewhere and realize you don't remember part of the journey. Small moments, but common moments. Very easy to dismiss. Yet all of them point toward the same uncomfortable question. How much of our lives are we actually aware of? Not remembering. Aware of. Those are different things, because memory concerns the past. Awareness concerns the present. And the woman on the road wasn't describing a faulty memory. She wasn't saying the details had become blurry. She wasn't saying the sequence of events was difficult to reconstruct. She was describing an absence, a gap, a stretch of existence that seemed to have happened without her. The car continued. The world continued. Time itself continued. But somehow, awareness did not. At least not in a way she could access forward, afterward. Maybe that's why stories of missing time have appeared throughout history in so many different forms. Different places, different explanations, different cultures. But often the same central experience. A person begins somewhere. A person ends up somewhere else. In between those points exists a blank page. People naturally try to fill that page. We are storytellers. We always have been. An unanswered question feels incomplete. A mystery demands a resolution. We want causes. We want explanations. We want the final chapter, but not every story provides one. And perhaps that's what makes certain mysteries valuable. Not because they reveal answers, because they reveal assumptions. The assumption that we understand our own minds. The assumption that awareness is simple. The assumption that being alive and being conscious are exactly the same thing. Well, maybe they are not. Maybe consciousness is stranger than that. Not in a supernatural or mystical way, just stranger. Consider how much happens beneath awareness every single day. Your heart beats without permission. Your lungs breathe without instruction. You navigate roads while thinking about something else entirely. You recognize faces instantly, interpret language effortlessly, make thousands of tiny decisions without ever even noticing them. The machinery of the mind is astonishingly complex. Most of it operates below the surface. Perhaps much more of life happens there than we'd like to admit. The possibility can feel frightening because it challenges our sense of control. We like believing we're fully present, fully aware, fully in charge. The alternative feels very unsettling. Yet there may be another way to look at it. Maybe stories about missing time don't reveal weakness. Maybe they reveal humility. A reminder that human experience is larger than our understanding of it. That there are rooms inside of our own minds we rarely enter. Processes we depend on without comprehending. Mysteries hiding inside ordinary existence. After all, even without dramatic stories of lost hours, most of us have experienced something similar on a smaller scale. Think about your childhood. Entire years have vanished. Not because nothing happened, because memory kept only fragments. A birthday cake, a classroom, a bicycle, a summer evening, tiny islands floating in a vast ocean of forgotten days. Most of your childhood is gone. Not the events, the experience of them. The same thing is true for adulthood. Last Tuesday, 3 months ago, an ordinary afternoon 5 years back. Most of it has already slipped away. The clock recorded every second. Life occurred exactly as it happened. Yet the overwhelming majority of it no longer exists within conscious reach. In a strange way, all of us are surrounded by missing time. Not 90 minutes. Entire years, entire chapters, whole landscapes of experience we once inhabited and can no longer fully access. Maybe that's why the woman's story resonates, because it takes something subtle and makes it impossible to ignore. It condenses a universal experience into a single unsettling event. A road, a haze, a missing hour and a half, a car pointing the wrong direction, and zero explanation. The older I get, the less interested I become in solving stories like this, and the more interested I become in sitting with them, allowing them to remain mysteries, allowing them to ask their questions, because not every mystery exists to be solved. Some exist to remind us how much we don't know about the world, about consciousness, about ourselves. The woman never discovered where those 90 minutes went. Maybe no one ever will. The road kept it a secret. The haze kept it secret, time kept it secret, and perhaps that's exactly why the story endures. Not because something impossible happened, but because something extraordinary happened in a way that exposed how extraordinary ordinary life already is.